Good afternoon, my name is William Ford and I've been asked by William MacDonald to provide you with details that might help to understand what being a stepfather means and entails. I've been married 3 times, been twice divorced, and I've been a stepfather to a son called Matthew. Some of you may for addressing us on this subject. Briefly, my most important one is that I've been there, had the t-shirt, done it. I've been a stepfather, and that's probably the most important credential of all, because I've made the mistakes, I've had the trepidations, the uncertainties, I've dealt with the problems, and I've come out all right, which seems to me to be the best criteria of all. Other criteria, I've been a probation officer for 27 years before I retired in West Yorkshire. I was a matrimonial guidance counsellor for a number of years, trained at the Tavistock Clinic. I founded anger management in the early 1970s. That's a method that helped violent people, often in domestic situations, manage their own anger, a method that was instantly taken up by all the English-speaking world, and which has helped numerous people since. And for over 55 years, I've been a relaxation training instructor, ever since I had a bad accident as a young child. I needed relaxation training to help me walk again and get over some of my own difficulties. So that's my background, but as I stated earlier, the most important background is having done the role as a stepfather and having made the mistakes that stepfathers, all new stepfathers, will make. First thing, I suppose, that's important to be aware of are the vital issues involved in the role of stepfather. When you're a stepfather, you essentially are asked to walk a domestic minefield of unexploded emotions of a child, which can blow up in your face at a moment's notice without the slightest warning. It will be easier, in fact, not only would it be easier, it is easier to walk on eggshells rather than to be a stepfather. Because whatever you do, you're going to do some things wrong. You're not going to get everything right. And the situation as a whole is so delicate, you're capable of hurting someone with little effort. And the person that you're capable of hurting most of all is a little child, a young child. So you've got to be aware of the vital issues when you're a stepdad. Some of these are dealing with the muddled maze of confused thoughts that a child will have, a labyrinth of emotional uncertainty and disturbance that they find hard to cope with. And they'll be asking themselves a question like, why did mum and dad separate? Was I responsible? That's a crucially important question that they always fix on to. Will they ever get back together again? And who's this new chap in mum's life? Is he a permanent feature? Is he going to be always there? Is he always going to be stopping mum getting back to dad? And these are issues that are always present in stepfather situations. One of the most important within that range of issues that I've just outlined there, range of questions, is the one about, was I responsible for mum and dad breaking up? All surveys in the past have shown that young children from separated parents believe that they were primarily responsible for the breakup. And they carry with them a guilt that is wrong to be carried. It's inaccurate. They shouldn't be carrying that guilt around with them, and it's a heavy load, too heavy a load for a young child to carry, especially when it's not true. So we have a responsibility as step-parents to reassure the child as often and wherever possible that they are not responsible for mum and dad's split. Mum and dad's relationship did not work out, but that was nothing to do with them. That was to do with mum and dad. That was to do with adult things, nothing at all to do with them. The stepfather should expect, especially at the early stages of a relationship with a stepchild, resistance, child rebellion, and even child rejection. In many ways, it's not too different from that of an adopted situation. When a child is adopted, past surveys have shown that the child often seeks to reject or resists in such a way and rebels in such a way that they're inviting their own rejection, just so they can turn around and say, see, I know you didn't love me, you didn't really want me. And it's pretty much the same with stepchildren as well. They will test you out. A child will wonder if the mum's new mum is an old flame. Was he around when dad was around? It depends how old the child is as to whether he'll have those thoughts or not. Those thoughts will certainly be present in a child that's near teenage years. Another important and vital thing to concern yourself with and be aware of is that you're taking 3 or 4 family units, fragmented family units, and you're trying to turn them into one happy family unit. The task is impossible. It can't be done. You can get something near appropriate, and that's probably about the best you can get. But you'll never get a happy family unit that could be as happy as if nobody had ever separated in the first place. So learn to settle for something that is not perfect, because you'll never get perfect out of this situation. Some of the roles that stepdads are asked to do are things like chastisement. That's a question most stepdads ask themselves. Do I chastise the child? Do I ask him to call me dad? Do I expect him to call me dad? How would I feel about that? All I can tell you is from my experience, I made it quite clear to my stepson, Matthew, that he has a dad that he sees every week on Access, that I'm his stepdad. He can see me as a second dad if he wants, but I can never replace his real dad. And that started off good for both of us, and it stayed that way. I also made it clear to Matthew that if he wanted to call me dad at any time, if he felt he wanted to, he could do, but I didn't expect him to, and I wouldn't think badly of him if he didn't. He never has called me dad in all the time I've known him, in all the time we were together, but every day I message him, and I always address him as son, and I always sign off as Dad Bill. So he has Dad Bill, who's his stepdad, and he's got Dad Alan, his blood father. The other issue that's important to deal with early on is the access issue of his real dad. Now, this was made easier for me because of my own situation with my first marriage. I had access denied to me by my wife, who frustrated the court's intentions to give me access. And it was denied to me for 2 years. And that put me in a pretty sad state for a long while. For about 2 years I almost cried every night going to sleep. But what it did do in a stepfather situation with this woman I was living with and subsequently married, what it did do was to make me more amenable to Matthew's father, more understanding of the situation he would be in. So I facilitated as much access as Matthew and his father wanted with each other, and that prevailed in all the years that Matthew grew up with us. That was a godsend to each of us, and especially because Matthew's father was a good man, is a good man, every bit as good a man as I am or will be, and that made it very, very easy to facilitate such access freely. It also made it easy, as far as I was concerned, with any guilt factors relating to his parental breakup. Even though I didn't have any guilt factors related to that, sometimes children hold you responsible for being with their mother, even if you didn't know the mother when the parents broke up. And I must admit I'd have found it pretty hard if I'd have known Matthew's mother before I split it with my own wife. I don't think I'd have been able to carry that guilt and step into the role of stepfather so easily. So let's recap the vital issues here. Be aware of all the issues that's going to concern you as a stepfather. The issues you can be aware of by speaking to other stepfathers, asking them for their advice, asking them about the problems they've experienced, reading. These are all ways of becoming more aware of the vital issues. Tread carefully when you're in a stepfather situation, because you're dealing with the feelings, the fragile feelings of a little person. And they can't cope and resolve those feelings like adults are able to get over difficulties and misunderstandings. With your stepchild, be appropriately assertive. That means don't be aggressive, and neither give in to them simply because you fear that you won't be accepted by them. Be as you would be with your own child all the time. Be considerate, be honest in what you tell them, in what they ask you, answer them as honestly as possible. Be fair, but be firm. And be as one with their mother whenever you're approaching them about whatever situation you're dealing with. Because we'll take it from me, if you and Mum aren't on the same hymn sheet, the child is going to perceive that instantly, and they're going to try and drive a wedge between you, and they'll succeed as well, because children can be very self-destructive and destructive to relationships that they don't want to see exist for any longer than they need to. Never pile on child guilt. Children have enough guilt on their own plate without you piling extra guilt on, because the guilt that they have is guilt that shouldn't be there anyway. It's guilt that they put there themselves, that they think ought to be there. It's a way of self-punishment, I suppose. So don't pile on the guilt. Never ever get yourself in a situation where you say to the child, I'm not surprised that your mum and dad split up if you behave like that. Because this is just a way of saying you were partly responsible for the breakup. Boundaries. Establish boundaries. Clear boundaries. Establish boundaries with your wife, the child's mother. Right from the beginning, establish what you should do and what you shouldn't do, what she's comfortable with you doing and what she's uncomfortable with you doing. Because it's no good way down the line. This has to be out in the front decided upon before you start dealing with the child together. And you keep dealing with the child together. You keep singing from the same hymn sheet. You don't let the child divide your opinions. Remember that you can't take 4 broken units and make them one whole, perfect unit. Don't try. You'll only cause yourself hurt, unnecessary hurt. Be accepting of the most you can get. I have 5 children from 3 marriages, 4 children from 2 marriages and a stepchild. I don't have any children in my current marriage. From the 5 children, I'd have to say that 4 of them relate as though they were full blood brother and sisters, and one of them is more distant. And the one that's more distant is the one that was brought up with his mother and not brought up with myself. I'm not blaming his mother for that, it's just a statement of fact. But 4 out of 5 I'm pretty content with, given the situation we started off with. So be satisfied with what you can get when you do your best. Avoid terminology in your household that is divisive and distancing. Using terms like half-brother, half-sister is divisive. It's like using fractions to break up the whole. Using terms like stepbrother and stepsister is emotionally distancing. It's like saying, you're one step further away from my mum or my dad than I am. So words are crucially important, especially in all communication, but especially with children. So use your words deliberately and carefully. And you don't necessarily have to chastise them for using terms like stepbrother, stepsister, half-brother, half-sister. All you do, in the behavioural sense of the word, is that you repeat the correct phrase back to them. You say, this is what your brother thinks, this is what your sister thinks. And if you say it enough times, and they don't hear you using the terms half-brother and stepsisters, they'll stop using it eventually. They'll see it's no point in doing it. The last point, which is probably the most important point of the lot, is don't knock the rock. Now I hear you asking yourselves, what's the rock? The rock is the father of the child that you're the stepfather to. If you knock the rock, if you knock the child's natural father, you're on a hiding to nothing. Because the natural father was the person that was there at the start of the child's life. He is their rock, was their rock, probably still is and will be in the future, and you should not try to take his place. You should not criticize him or defame him in any way. If you knock the rock, you're going to finish up in the water yourself, drowning. You're not going to get anywhere. I was very lucky because, as I said earlier, Matthew's father is a good man, a nice man. I didn't have to knock him. I wouldn't have knocked him anyway, but there was no reason to. He was a good man. So don't knock the rock. Now I hope some of those points are of assistance to you in your lives and in your work. They're given to you as modestly as I can give them to you. They're given to you from a stepfather who made lots of mistakes, but I did pretty well. The stepfather role is one of the hardest roles that anyone can ever be asked to undertake. But if you get it somewhere near right, it can be the most satisfying. Good afternoon and God bless you all.